Hello, I'm Seamless, and today is Tuesday, which means it's time for a new FL Basics tutorial. This is a continuation in the series on Sytrus, and today is going to be about the matrix, the FM matrix, and filters. So the reason why I'm doing both of these at once is because the way that the filters work is very heavily to do with the way the matrix works, because you need to use the matrix in order to use them. So we're going to talk about the matrix as it refers to filters, and then we'll talk about how the filters work themselves. The filters are not terribly complicated. They're pretty similar to how the operators function in terms of controlling parameters, and they're also just filters, so it's not a super complex theory. But the matrix can be somewhat weird. So let's talk about the matrix. This is where I make a matrix joke. Let's pretend that I did. Alright, so let's say that you want to filter something. Alright. So right now we have operator 1 on by default. I'm in the default patch. You know, go to the presets, default. That's where I'm at. So right now it's routed out positively. All the matrix knobs work on plus and negative. So the center position where they're all at by default, except for the first output, is 0. And then we have positive out and then negative out. So positive out for the thing. So let's make this a saw wave so we have actually something to actually pick a triangle wave. It's always fine. So we have a saw wave. Turn down a little bit. So I did that just so that we had something, actually frequencies to filter. So this is how it's routed out. So let's say we want it to be in a filter. Sytrus has 3 filters. They're up here, filter 1, filter 2, filter 3, next to the 6 operators and the 1 effects. So let's say I want the browser to filter 1. How do we do that? Well, first you take the operator 1 over here and you say, okay, I want it to be in filter 1. So then we say, okay, route to filter 1. This is how we do that. We turn it on with the little knob at the matrix here. But there's no sound. Why is that? Well, we also have to tell the filter to output. So we have to go to the out section over here and put the one on that's next to the filter, the one that the filter leads to. And now it's going out. So the filter interface is different from the operator interface. Obviously, it has all the filter stuff, and as well, you see in the parameters tabs list over here on top, we have a bunch of additional ones that are not true, that are not present for the rest of them for the operators. Blech. The relationship between the parameters tab and the modifier tab works the same way as the operators do, in the sense that the first tab here are all the parameters. So we have cutoff here, and over here we have all the modifiers like envelope, LFO, key mapping, velocity mapping, modifier X, modifier Y, randomization, and unison index mapping. That will get its own tutorial. And the parameters we have are panning, volume, cutoff, resonance, the low band, the bandwidth, the high band, wave shaping, and the wave shape mix. The wave shape, this is just the wave shaper. This isn't actually a parameter because we can't mess with it. But the volume of the wave shaper and the influence it gets is controlled by the wave shaper mix over here. Now these guys are interesting. Now, if we look at the information, like if we mouse over it, we look over here onto the upper left information tab, we see that this over here says filter low gain drive. And then we have filter band and filter high. Now this basically applies to this SVF filter here, which has the low and the band and the high. And what this is a filter that actually has the 3 most common modes, which is to say it has a low pass, a band pass, and a high pass. By default, only the low pass is engaged. But you can also engage, them all themselves. And then so that means that the low, band, and the high can be controlled individually. That's what that's for. The other filter types don't really matter for that much. You see, but except for the some of them have gain and drive. You see how the high shelf filter has a gain, and then the low pass 3 filter has a drive. Because it actually distorts it a little bit. The filters have a bunch of options individually. They have the X1, X2, X3, and then alternate X2 and 3. Has alternate resonance mode for flat or whatever. It's just labeled flat, but it says it up there, and up there has the alternate resonance bandwidth mode. And then it has oversampling, And oversampling is it's resampling, which I may have done a tutorial about. It basically when you render something and you see this option, the resampling option, and also here in the audio options you see it has the resampling option. That's to attenuate aliasing. And aliasing is what happens when you have higher frequencies that are higher than the Nyquist frequency. The Nyquist frequency is half that of the sample rate. So in the case of 44.1 kilohertz, the Nyquist frequency would be 22.05 kilohertz. And if you have a sound that goes higher than 22.05 kilohertz, it will, instead of going, up above it, it'll wrap it around and then to go back down the spectrum. And this creates a very unique and particular sound, and it's called aliasing. And then if you turn on oversampling, it will attenuate the aliasing, or it'll be anti-aliasing, which is to say. So that what creates that sound. It'll actually go up to the spectrum, the end of the Nyquist frequency, and then you won't hear it as it goes higher. So you hear the sound without the aliasing in the correct spectrum. That's what that does. Now, you also may have noticed that we have this also on the front page, the oversampling. And this is because you have oversampling that's the result of, or you have aliasing that's the result of the actual FM process, and then you can also have aliasing as a result of something you do with the filters. So that's what the HQ option is here and here. I actually did an experiment recently where I discovered that the project resampling up in the audio settings actually won't stop Sytrus from aliasing. If you do something with the FM, you actually have to use the oversampling in Sytrus to stop the aliasing. I discovered this when I was doing a lesson with somebody. So that's what that is. Oh, that was a lot of science, wasn't it? Indeed. So that's what that's what the main filter window is. We have a whole bunch of filter options, all of your usual options for at least FL-based filters. We have our envelope knob, cutoff, and resonance, and drive, and all that good stuff. And then their respective parameters in the tabs, which we can then control with the modifiers and stuff. Just a real quick tutorial about how the modifiers work, because sometimes it gets confusing. If you want to map, say, the cutoff to mod X, we go to the cut, that's the parameter, and then we go to the modifier, and we see we have going to mod X. And now we see this graph, and it's a flat line. This graph represents the position of the X knob. So here you see this white line in the middle. That's actually where the knob is. Now you see it moved. Now it's moved. So over here is where the knob is at 0, and here's where the knob is at 100. So this line here represents the value of the change in the parameter as the knob moves between 0 and 100. So right now this means that there's no change. It'll be the parameter you set. So if I set cutoff to be here and move the knob, no change will happen because there's no change set. But if I do this, now there's change. So this line represents a 1-to-1 relationship, which means to say that the parameter will move down to 0 when the knob is at 0. However, it's not actually at 0. It actually gets to 0 long before it gets down here because the filter setting, the cutoff setting, is not in dead center. For this to be really 1-to-1 with the X knob, it has to be dead center because the center position of the knob, like here, is wherever the parameter is set with this knob. That's what that. So like if I set it here, see how like the sound doesn't change when I move it around up here is because it actually reached peak like over here. That's because the cutoff parameter, the actual main parameter itself, was not set to center. So if you want direct control over that, you need to set it center. Of course, you don't need to just do that. You could do all kinds of other wackiness. But just standard mapping is what I had just done, which is this 1-to-1 linear relationship. Yeah, so that's how you map it to X. That's how you map anything to X modifiers, by the way. They're all set like that. They're all by default. See, some of them are set to half, and some of them are set to full. They're all set to whatever the default is that keeps the value at its default position to ensure that when you move the knobs, they're not going to change the parameters. That's what they're all set up by default. You have to in order to change them into the linear relationship, you just got to make the graph like so. Okay, so then in addition to the filter, we get wave shaping settings for each of the filters. The wave shaper in Sytrus works exactly like the wave shaper does just in FL. It's an in-out graph. So on the x-axis at the bottom here, we have in, and on the y, we have out, which is to say, if it comes in at a certain level, like that reaches half here, then it's going to get put out to be more than that. So like if I were to change this to the linear relationship, this would mean no change at all to the amplitude of the sound. But then if I do this will mean that it's being saturated a little bit, which is not on right now. And wave shaping, if this wasn't clear already, it's distortion. It's a distortion type, and it's a very manual distortion. You can change the character of it yourself very directly, and it has interesting results on the sound. So, like I said before, this is not a parameter, but it's in the parameters tab. And in order to change the amount that it's applied to the sound itself, you want to change the mix, which is this knob here, and so we can map that to all sorts of stuff. So over here we have the unipolar bipolar mode. This will change into bipolar mode, which means that the wave shaping is going to apply to the positive and negative polarity of the wave shape of the shape of the wave differently. But what I mean by that is that if you look at, say, the sine wave, you see how it goes up and then it goes down. So in the middle here is the zero value, zero amplitude. So we have positive amplitude and negative amplitude. So then bipolar wave shaping means that it will affect the positive amplitude differently from the negative amplitude. And that creates very interesting sounds. And one of the things that does, though, is that do we have DC offset somewhere? We should, because yeah, right there. So one of the things that happens is that if you apply different wave shaping to one pole versus the other pole, you get what's called an offset. And what this means is that the sound you'll actually see it physically move up, like in the spectrum, the scope, the oscilloscope. Jesus. You'll see it actually move up or down and be offset from center. And so in order to solve that, we can go to the front here and click on center. And this will remove every DC offset. As well, there's also a center for each individual operator. And this does the same thing because sometimes FM will do that too. However, to fix the filters wave shaping offset, you'll want to do that on the global up here. Yes. So that's the wave shaper. Now, any operator in the matrix can be put into any of the three filters or all of them at once. So, like for example, I could put them all three filters and have all three filters go out. So these could be all different kinds of filters. You can control like how loud they are and what times they are, and individually modulate all of them. That could be a thing. You can also change the polarity of them all. You know, if you wanted to do that kind of funness. You could also put different operators into different filters. So we're gonna have 1, 2, and 3, say, go into filter 1, 2, and 3 as such. As well, you can have filters go into other filters. However, you don't do this in the matrix. So the way that you do this is actually pretty similar to how you would do the LUT filter, where each filter has a next knob. And you can now you think, okay, so it's one of those 100 negative 100 knobs, which means it goes in positive polarity and negative polarity, but that's what that means. You might think that because you can go one way or the other way, that means that, it's going into the first filter or the one that's going in next to it or behind it. Nope. This knob is always the next filter, which makes sense because there's nothing before filter 1 and there's nothing after filter 3 and there's just no knob. So that's what's up. So the next option for filters is a linear relationship, which is to say that the filter 1 can only go into filter 2 and filter 2 can only go into filter 3. That kind of thing. This is handy for like if you wanted to make all your filter business in filter 1 and then you wanted to make like another filter in filter 2 and then you wanted to distort the two of them together. So what you would do is you'd route them into filter 3, and that's more or less what's up with that. Yes. So we have other options in the matrix. We have pan and effects. Pan is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's basically just a panning setting for each operator in each filter. And then we have effects. Now this is basically the matrices effects send. So it's like if I want effects on something, I gotta route it into the effects the matrix. And in the effects they have a bunch of basic stuff. We got the chorus, a pan in the effects, which is very interesting. And then we have all the effects for the choruses. We have a send, which I'll talk about in a second, and then we have these. We have 3 delay modules, which are very interesting. And these are all the same kind of delay, but there's 3 of them, so you can have very complicated delay setups. And then a reverb, which is very standard reverb. These effects are all very standard, but what's kind of cool is that we can actually send it offset. So like, let's put out. All right. It actually puts it to a send. That's very interesting. So, send to offset track number. Yeah. So these are actually setting it to the mixer's sends, like literally the sends, the 4 sends that are in the mixer. Which is rather interesting because I really just never use the sends, but that's what it does. And this could be, I mean, this could be an interesting feature for like if you're doing complicated like FM related business, and then you could say, oh, let's route the effects, and then let's route it like out someplace else and affect them individually and mix them individually. See, what's interesting is that you could actually put something out, like right now there's no sound, but you can actually put it out the effects and not out the out, and it'll still make sound. This is because it's all wet. There's no dry sound coming out of the effects. The dry sound comes in the out. You notice how I turned the chorus off and now there's no sound at all. So it's a very interesting relationship for effects in Sytrus. I see that as kind of a very interesting sort of option for making sounds, because I usually do everything in post myself, but it's interesting that option exists. So I want to talk about one more thing about the matrix. So we covered how you make it work in the filter, where you route it into like a filter like so. Say now 1 is in filter 1, and then 2 is in filter 2, and 3 is filter 3. And 4 is filter 1, and then 5 is filter 3, and 6 is filter 2. That's kind of how that works. But and then of course if you want to FM something, you say like, oh, I want to FM operator 1 by operator 2, so now 2 is going to go into 1. And if you're ever confused about, say, like if this is this 2 into 1 or is that 2 into 1, like if you're confused about that, you can mouse over it and it'll actually show you up in the info up here what that knob does. So this says operator 2 to 1, and this says operator 1 to 2. And this is operator 1 frequency modulation feedback, which is to say that it's FMing itself. And it makes a very interesting effect. And that good stuff. But if we go down here, we see it says FM, and over here we have RM. What does that mean? Well, this is related, but it's a separate matrix. So like I say, if I wanted to RM 3 by 2, then go back to FM, you see the knob's gone. I could say operate, 2 on 1 and all this good stuff. However, this isn't separate modulation. It's a different kind of modulation, but one operator is still FMing, or is still operating on another operator. And what I mean by this is that if I were to say RM 3 to 2 and then FM 3 to 2, I can't control the modulation of RM and FM individually. So if I go into operator 2 and go to the mod section and then set the modifier X to control the input of modulation, it will control in total the FM and the RM. RM, by the way, stands for ring modulation, which is in this case amplitude modulation, versus pitch modulation, which is what FM is. It's not literally amplitude modulation. Someone pointed out to me one time that amplitude modulation means something different than ring modulation, but you could easily make it amplitude modulation by the technical definition. However, it's just the basic point of it is that ring modulation modulates the volume of an operator versus frequency modulation, where an operator modulates the pitch of an operator. That's the difference. However, these like I said, these matrices are separate in the sense that like I'm gonna do whatever I want over here and I'll do whatever I want over here, but there are still only 6 operators. There's not 6 other operators that are doing ring modulation. It's the same operator. So if you control the volume of that operator, it will modulate both the RM input and the FM input of that operator. For years I didn't even know that was there. I had the slightest idea. I have a bunch of how to bases where I experiment with combining FM and RM on a single sound. They're easy to spot in terms of titles because it's FM and RM together and stuff like that. Whenever you see RM in a title, that's what that's about. Yeah, I think I covered everything that's reasonable for this particular thingy. If you have any questions about any of that, I mean, I would, but if you do, I will try to answer them. Maybe someone else can answer them because some people are pretty smart about this sort of stuff, but I will try to answer it. And as usual, have a nice day.